Hi there guys, today we're going to talk about water starting the other way. Now most of you are at this stage probably have experienced that you've got one side on which you are much better and one side on which you are just god awful. You really struggle to put it together. It feels really unnatural. You just can't get your head around what's going on. It's perfectly normal. Most people we see experience this, especially if you've come from a background such as snowboarding, surfing, skateboarding, a board sport where you generally have one stronger foot than the other. You generally tend to ride regular or goofy all the time, and this imbalance becomes even greater, if you like. So why does this happen? Well, what we see mostly is, well, first of all, if you haven't listened to the podcast of when I talk about water starting, give you all kind of the overview of water starting, go and listen to that. The link is in the show notes below this video. Go and have a listen to that, watch the accompanying video to that as well, and then come back and listen to this, because that will answer an awful lot of your questions before you even start, okay? And a lot of the things I'm going to talk about here are covered in more detail in that video, in that podcast. So go and check that out, then come back and watch this. So, first things first, what we're trying to do when we water start, obviously, let's say this is our wind, okay, so it's coming that way. What we need to do when we water starting is we need to actually ride off downwind, okay? Now, most of you know this, okay, so I'm not going to labour the point. What we generally tend to see is that on your stronger side, this is quite natural, and you can do this quite naturally. On your weaker side, what you tend to do is one of two things. Often people try and ride very hard upwind. Now this is generally the people, if you're coming out of the water nice and controlled, you're coming out of the water nice and slowly, and what you do is, because it feels so unnatural, you dig that edge in. Because your brain actually doesn't want to ride downwind. Because let's face it, when you start riding in this direction, downwind is actually a really uncomfortable point of sail. You've got weight on your front foot and you're not being counterbalanced by the kite, you're just following behind the kite with a flat board. Now, I don't know how many of you snowboard or do any of the board sports, but if you do, you know that having a flat board is the most uncomfortable position in snowboarding, because a little tweak and you're going to fly off. Same in this, kite surfing is edge to edge. You always want an edge engaged, and when you ride downwind, you can't engage an edge, so it's a very uncomfortable point of sail. So why the hell do we tell you to ride downwind? Well, because to start with, you won't have the edge control to not be able to ride downwind. So what we're trying to do, the idea of riding downwind is you've got the kite here, the lines and the board are all pointed in the same direction. So the pull all goes in the same direction. So you don't need to be greatly controlling the power in the kite. You don't need to be controlling the edge. You're just going to ride after the kite, and that's what we're trying to achieve straight off. So what we've seen is, the problem is that on their good side, again, this is generally the people who are coming out controlled. So you'll be coming out of the water quite slow. You'll generally be staying quite low. That will all look really nice, but then you'll just stall. What's probably happening is you're trying to ride upwind. And again, I always compare this to snowboarding. Imagine when you start snowboarding, well, some of you do, most of us don't just point the board straight downhill and shoot off as fast as we can. Most people go down on their heels, super slow, with the board perpendicular to the slope, edging the whole way down, and eventually they'll kind of tweak and point the board down the hill a little bit, and then they'll grip back on the edge because they're scared, they're hanging on for grim death to that edge. And that's exactly what you're doing here. Your brain doesn't want to turn the board down, it doesn't want to release down the slope, if you like, so it stays on the edge. And you're trying to hold the edge, trying to control the power in the kite, because you don't want to let it go, because you don't feel comfortable enough on that, which is your weaker side. Okay, the other reason, obviously, as soon as you point the board downwind, you are in danger of flying over the front. And this is something that generally on your weaker side you're desperately trying to avoid, because you haven't got the same control. You feel much more uncomfortable, so you try and dig the edge in to prevent you from going over the front. Okay, so the answer to this is twofold. If you're doing this, that's just a bit of a reason why, but if you're doing this, the answers we've seen is twofold. concentrate on really, really pulling that back leg in as you come up. And I would even say, because you're probably coming up quite controlled if you're doing this, you could even think about pushing the front leg away from you a little bit, so you get that board angled at that angle away from the wind and can get pulled off downwind. The other one, as we talked about in the podcast, is bring the kite down. I don't know if you remember this, we talked about there's your wind window. Finish the stroke off. So make sure you do this, because the other problem we see here is that people are doing that an awful lot. So they're pulling the kite out, so they're sweeping the kite down. As soon as they get power again, because it feels so uncomfortable, they don't want to release and glide. They just, oh cool, I'm up, great, let's keep the kite here, that's great. And they just kind of sink again. So this is the other big one. Finish the stroke off. Bring that kite all the way through and give yourself the time for the second one. Again, I cover that more in the podcast, so go and have a look at the podcast, have a listen to the podcast, and that will make more sense. But finishing the stroke off is essential for this. I would guarantee you do one of those two things. Not pointing the board, probably both those two things. Not pointing the board downwind enough, and then coming up, and as soon as you're up, stopping the kite, and the kite's still quite high. You haven't brought the kite all the way down to get that glide out. Okay? So that's the first one we talk about. The second one we often see is people who come up like they've been shot out of a cannon. So they come up, whoomph, and they just go flying straight over the front. Now this might be you as well. So you're probably doing it quite well, quite nice, quite controlled on your stronger side. As soon as it comes to your weaker side, whoomph, you just go flying over the front. And you've got no idea, you cannot grasp what's going on. This is generally something else. This is generally that people are standing up. And they're coming up super, super tall. And it's because they're focusing so much generally on pushing that front leg away that they stand up and then go straight over the front. Or it could be that they're really desperately trying to control the power as it comes on through the kite. So even while they're in the water, they push their feet through the board and they try and stand up. Everything else that we do when you stand up, you extend your legs. And this is what people do. So they extend their legs as they're standing up. They come up standing straight. Obviously now your centre of gravity is very high and you just go straight over the front. So the way to counteract this, there's a few things you can do. Remember, as we're water starting, you want to do nothing. That's crucial. What actually happens when you water start, think like you're sat in the water, you put some power through the kite, and most people think at this point, this is where I push through my legs. You don't. You actually relax your legs. Your legs should compress in towards your body. And then that creates this kind of lever effect whereby as your legs compress, there's still resistance in the board, but your legs get closer to your body. Because your hands are high and the kite's high, the only way that you can go is to roll up. Now most people, especially on your weaker side, because you're desperately trying to stand up, will push through the legs. And so they come up super straight, super high, and they either go flying, they put loads of power through the kite, or they'll just drop over the front, quite undignified. So what you want to do here is make sure as you're coming up, you relax your legs, you really compress your legs into your body. And those of you who wakeboard will know what I'm talking about, because it's exactly the same as that. Just let your legs compress into your body. You come up, and then as you do that, rather than thinking about pointing that front foot downwind, think about retracting your back leg. This just keeps you small. So pull your back leg in, and that will have the same effect as straightening your front leg. Keep the board at 45 degrees, but it will enable you to glide off. So they're the two big problems that we generally see. Okay, so if you can see yourself, or you can visualize yourself doing one of those things, that's probably the problem. The other thing that I would say that really, really helps on this, practice on your good side. And then go back to your bad side and don't think, but feel the difference. Now there's a subtle difference, because what you're probably doing, the difference probably isn't huge. The difference is probably a few grams of weight here and a few centimeters of difference in what you're doing with one of your legs or something over there. It's probably not a huge difference. It's actually quite difficult to analyze this sometimes, even when we've got video feedback going on, because the differences are so small. So often it's very, very easy for you to feel this. We've experienced this all the time. We've said, well, just feel the difference. Someone goes out and they do this and they come back to us and they tell us, right, I've got it. This is what I was doing. And it's generally one of those things that we talked about, but until you actually feel that difference, it's quite difficult for you to work it out, okay? So that's the big tip I would give you. Go out, press on your good side. Okay, how did that feel? Cool, yeah, and then change that. And there's probably something that you're doing quite different on your weaker side, that once you concentrate on how it feels, will become much more apparent. Okay, so as always, guys, any comments, hit them in the comments below, obviously. Any questions, sam@tantrumkitesurf.com, you can get me there. If you're interested in taking this further, come and see us out here. This is something we deal with every week. So come and see us out here. We'll get you through this very, very quickly. Check out the website, tantrumkitesurf.com. Come and see us out in Tarifa and blast you past this point, okay? Thanks for watching, guys, and we will see you in the next video. Cheers, goodbye.